All right. So we're in the final week of our January Back to Basics series. And it is always the time of year when we take a look at the fundamentals of what we teach in the Science of Mind and Spirit and New Thought in general. And this year I've opted to cover the basics of what we teach without the use of jargon. And I've been quite successful. I'm actually pretty proud of myself. So if you want to catch the previous two talks, you can catch those on our YouTube channel. And you can watch the whole service via Facebook Live, because those are the services in their entirety are on the Facebook page. And on the website, Megan said. Okay, so we're going to address two things today, because recall that every theology, every philosophy even that attempts to explain the world has to answer a set of basic questions. And the final two that we're going to address, or I'm going to address today, are where do we go from here, and why do we suffer? So I'm going to read you a quote. Remember, I can use jargon if it's a quote. Don't forget. This here's what Ernest Holmes said about where we go from here. We believe in the eternality, the immortality, and the continuity of the individual soul, forever and ever expanding. So what's he saying there? That in Holmes's opinion, when this physical body wears out, the you that you know, personality and all, or self-awareness, I should say, consciousness and all, goes on after this body wears out to another adventure. Ernest Holmes was very clear that that was his belief, based on everything that he had studied. He didn't see the point in becoming an individualized expression, only to lose that individuality after this lifetime. Ernest Holmes was also very clear on two other things. The first one is you're entitled to your own opinion. And since none of us know, you should have your own opinion. One of the things I love about this philosophy is you only get to believe what resonates with you, or you get to believe only what resonates with you. You're free to tweak things or reinterpret or ignore them altogether. As a person who doesn't like to be told what to do, this is very important to me. So Ernest Holmes said, hey, this is what I think. You think what you think. Now, I want you to, again, juxtapose that with this idea that's present in many traditions, that this lifetime is all about earning favor so that you can have an elevated experience in the afterlife. So whether that's you get saved by grace or by works, whichever, and you accept a personal Savior, all of that goes on so that you can, my mother used to say that she had enough kids that she was pretty sure that her chair in heaven was clinched, reserved, right? So we do this whole lifetime, and we put up with the misery and the unknowing because we're wretched souls, but we've been saved, so we're going on to something different, and it's going to be better. Ernest Holmes said, no, this is the manifest body of God. God's not somewhere hereafter or stuck in a Bible or a Hebrew Bible or any scripture at another time. God's happening right now, and God is going to continue to happen. And I like that. So you essentially get to take it up for yourself, contemplate it for yourself. I will tell you that when I was like, say, in my 20s, I didn't do a lot of contemplating of the hereafter. Because in your 20s, you're still bulletproof, right? And now that I'm in midlife, I think about it more. I do. And then I think, so what? I'm going to move on now. So if we're not focused on the hereafter and we're focused on the here and now, what is our relationship? See, this is an interesting topic. So the question I want to address is, why do we suffer? And gosh, there's a lot of ways to look at that. Do I need my notes for this, or can I see y'all? Well, let me give you this is what Ernest Holmes said. I do not believe God has imposed suffering to punish us or to teach us a lesson. Whew, good. Then he goes on to say, the world is beginning to realize that it has learned all it can through suffering and pain. Perhaps they were good in their place, but surely there can be no power in the universe which wishes man to be sick, to suffer pain, to be unhappy, and end up in the grave. How many of y'all believe that? Theoretically speaking. How many of y'all catch yourself at times believing that in some way you're supposed to suffer? Right? The other shoe's going to drop. Can it be this good? Have I paid my dues? See, in Alcoholics Anonymous, I learned, I shouldn't say I learned, I should say it was beat into my head, that pain is inevitable, but suffering and misery are optional. Right? So there's actually a couple of elements to that. I have a habit sometimes, less now than before, of taking something that should be pain. So like somebody, let's just say it's a match. Like, it's a match. Right? Pain. And then I bring my tools in. I get me a stick, wrap a bunch of muslin around it, pour some kerosene on it, and light that thing so it gets real big. I don't recommend that. I don't recommend that. And here's the thing. I don't know if it came from the idea, I grew up in Catholicism. My mother, there was a lot of, you're. And I'm not sure how it happened, but somehow even when I gave up the idea, theoretically, that I didn't need to suffer, even when I gave up or began to give up the habit of magnifying my pain into unnecessary misery, even when I did both what I found is that part of my identity was in suffering. I had a traumatic childhood, and it got to a certain point where it's like, well, if I'm not the pain I've always carried, what am I? And that threw me very often into an existential crisis that I'll talk about another time. But do you see what I'm saying? The suffering, the habit of making things worse, all of that, we sort of absorb it, even if it's completely on accident, and we allow it to trouble our waters. Now I want to flip to the other side of this thing we call New Thought, this thing we call Science of Mind, and show you another, maybe a pitfall on the opposite side of this relationship with pain and suffering, right? So I came into New Thought, and I was so excited about like the possibilities and what I was truly made of and who I really was, and then I hit my first wall where it was like, oh, this hurts. And there was this sort of center of gravity of some of the practitioners that I knew at the time, and they would say, well, how did you create that? Or what's in your consciousness that you're in pain? I don't recommend that. And what happens is we come to this philosophy and we find out that we actually are the captain of our own destiny. And we misinterpret that to thinking that now that I know the power of thought, if I never think another negative thought, I'll never have another negative feeling. And that is, it doesn't work. And that's actually not the thing, right? Because life is painful sometimes. Life is a challenge. I want to read you this, one of my... This is a Brene Brown quote. She says, "You're imperfect and you're wired for struggle, but you are worthy of love and belonging. In a universe that is in constant expansion, constant newness, you are wired to become new, become a fuller expression of yourself." See, so let's say we are built for struggle. That doesn't mean we're built for struggling. And what it does mean is that when we encounter the places that scare us, when we encounter the places where we have to revisit old pain in order to make it whole, it's actually our relationship to the pain that determines whether or not the degree of suffering or maybe even misery that we experience from it. People die, pets die, dreams die, hopes die, people move away. You see, life is it's in flow. Michael's teacher used to say that there was no way to avoid the vicissitudes of life. Vicissitudes, I know it's an SE word. Don't do your vicissitudes in Mississippi. No. And there's not. And so we go through periods where the tide is receding or we're slogging through the mud, whatever you want to call it. But that doesn't mean that we have to massage it and make it worse. It just means we have to be with it. Because in all honesty, I think it's the avoidance of suffering that causes more suffering than suffering. In all honesty, it is oftentimes the avoidance of suffering that causes more pain than suffering. Or causes more suffering than suffering. Okay. Now I want to take you in one more direction here. relative to this idea of suffering. And so the question is, why do we suffer? Well, what I know isn't true is it's not ordained. We're not created to suffer. What I do know is that because of the vicissitudes of life, sometimes we suffer or are in pain, but we don't have to make it worse. There's a great line in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, one of the things I love about my job is there's so much wisdom in that book, and if you're not fortunate enough to be a drunk or drug addict or some other thing that would require 12-step addressing, I get to share that with y'all. So there's this great line in there, and here's the line. We avoid the deliberate manufacture of misery. We avoid the deliberate manufacture of misery. One more thing on that. If you find yourself in hell, keep walking. Keep walking. Don't stop. Just keep moving. Be present. Keep moving. All right. So I think I've covered all 7 of the questions, and I want to talk to you about, just for a few minutes, why are we here? Why then are we here? Well, I'm going to borrow a phrase from Mary Mann Morrissey. She says, we are here for the discovery and the delivery of the authentic self. We're here to discover who and what we are and to live it out loud. This glasses thing is really annoying. All right. Now here's the thing. If you're living out loud, if you are attuned to the indwelling presence that's actually giving you clues about how you're seeking to express and what newness is looking to come through you, that invariably involves risk. Right? There's that quote about, you can live a relatively safe life, but you'll be living without possibility. No risk, no possibility. Okay, so when we encounter the places that scare us or the places that we have to push past, we can say no to that. A little piece of us dies, but we can say no. And so if we agree, if we say yes, if we meet life and allow life to come up through us and we go, the possibility is inherently risky. And it actually increases the likelihood that we may encounter some pain. You should do it anyway. What I really know about pain is when your heart breaks, it breaks open. So we're here to discover and deliver the authentic self, and that self is actually showing us something new that it wants to do through us, as us, all the time. And when we say yes to it, we increase our chance of discomfort and maybe even pain and maybe even suffering, not misery, but somewhere in that continuum of discomfort. I think it's actually possible, again, where we don't make the suffering worse by avoiding the suffering. We not make the pain worse by avoiding the pain. We just say, wow, this is painful. Because what I know is I'm just absolutely certain of this. There's something that you came here to do that no one else can do. And while it's impossible to reduce or diminish the divine in any way, it is also true on the opposite, like it's a polarity, right? Both things true. You can't do anything to reduce God. And yet, if you aren't you, if you don't say yes to who you are and who you're becoming, there's a hole in the heart of God. And both of those things are true. I want to read you a Howard Thurman quote. Howard Thurman is one of my favorite Christian philosophers, I guess. There is something in every one of you that waits and listens for the sound of the genuine in yourself. It is the only guide you will ever have. And if you cannot hear it, you will all of your life spend your days on the ends of strings that somebody else pulls. You're the only one that can do you. And somewhere within you and above you and around you is a divine idea about who and what that is, or who and what is next in what that is. And your choices, of course, good news, bad news, your choices are to say no, live as safely as you can, and suffer from that. Or say yes, step beyond whatever it is. Might be a job, might be a calling, might be a parenting, could be anything. You step beyond and you get okay with the discomfort. And you move into a better, bigger, more loving, more genuine version of yourself. So I want to take just a minute to do a really quick closed eye process. Go ahead and get comfortable in your chair. Take a deep breath. Feel your shoulders gently fall away from your ears. Allow your jaw to relax, your hands to unclench. And then take another breath and notice that the breath is expanding your whole body. Now slowly and gently move your awareness into the center of your chest. And then a little bit lower, right into your solar plexus. This is where the yes comes from, this solar plexus and heart area. And I want you to spend a few minutes there and ask yourself this question. What is next for me to discover and deliver? And remember, this is just a mental exercise. So tell yourself you can't fail. You cannot fail. What do you discover and deliver if you know you cannot fail? So as we move into a prayer, know that this is your question this week. What am I discovering and delivering? So right here and right now, with each of us aware of the indwelling presence that is life itself, that is spirit, that is God. Join me as I surrender to this indwelling presence, this God self, this Christ consciousness, the Buddha nature. Call it what you will. It is the very presence of life seeking to have experience as you and as me. And it's pretty insistent. So what I affirm for myself in this moment is that I say yes early and I say yes often. Yes to a greater expression of the shape of my soul. Yes to a greater sense of peace and purpose. Yes to compassion and kindness. Whatever your yes is, whatever calls to you, surrender early, surrender often. Open yourself wide and give yourself to life. Take a risk. Fail. Cry. Laugh. With a sense of openness and a sense of willingness, I release these words, and I know that they're already true, and I know there's only one place to fall, and that is to the arms of life itself. For this and so much more, for all the way showers, for this day and for sunshine, I say thank you. Thank you, God. Let me remember that it's good. And so it is. Amen.
open wide.